So welcome back to CSC 235. This is our weekly session where we review the rest of our content for the Module 2 study guide and the rest of the assignments and solutions before we post the assessment, the Module 2 assessment. So one thing we're going to do between now and next week, by the time we start class next week, you will have completed your first attempt of the Module 2 assessment. And in order to prepare for that, you're going to complete the 2.2 assignment and the 2.3 solution, which complement the extra assignment and the 2.1 NIC assignment that we did last week. So inside here, we covered creating a Microsoft 2022 Server 2022 Standard Edition virtual machine, and that's what we did in order to set the stage for your first assignment, and that had to do with changing network settings. So you flipped into and out of, if you followed along and flipped into and out of the network settings for the Ethernet, you were in NAT mode or bridged mode. Does everybody understand what I mean by NAT mode or bridged mode?
Yes.
Okay. Sometimes when you connect a new virtual machine after it's been built, you can't connect the network, and the default setting is NAT, and then it's easy to set it to bridged or vice versa. If you configure it to be in bridged mode because you want it to have a separate IP address, when it's in bridged mode, it acts like a device or a system, just like any other on your local network. When it's in NATed mode, your laptop works like a Wi-Fi router. So the network that your virtual machine connects to is inside your local laptop only. That's another difference between NAT and bridged, right? So you notice that the address changed when you flipped that switch and made that change, and that's because the server was connected to itself inside your laptop in NAT mode, or it was connected to your local network where it could speak and talk to your Wi-Fi router. And that's one of the realities that we wanted to clarify about what these network settings actually do and mean. Now, based on that information, does anyone have any observations or comments or questions? Did anyone encounter anything unusual when you flipped into NAT mode or bridged mode? System crashed, couldn't connect, that kind of thing. Anybody? No? Okay. So assignment 2.2 is really about maintaining the hypervisor. Does anyone remember what the term hypervisor means? Hello? Yes, no? What is the hypervisor for the, all right, let's change the question. Tell me the name of the hypervisor that's used when you built your server for the 2.0 solution.
VirtualBox.
VirtualBox, yes. And VirtualBox runs like an application on the desktop, yeah? It's a type 2 hypervisor, so it provides an environment where your laptop hardware devices which are these devices. Let's, I've showed you the device manager before, right? Have we seen this before in our class?
I think we have.
So this is my laptop device manager in Windows 11. And the device manager creates virtual components based on the actual physical components. There's a CPU, but it's a virtual CPU. There are graphics adapters or display adapters. There's an NVIDIA adapter. These are all virtual versions. They're virtualized or abstracted versions of the physical devices that are running in memory right now when Windows is operating. So my operating system does this. And in fact, when you go on in our computer science program or in our ACS Tech certificate program and you engage in either CSC235, the deployment operating system deployment practices, or in CSC410, principles of operating systems, one thing that you learn about operating systems is that they're often referred to as the virtual machine. Now, nobody calls it the virtual machine. We just call it Android or iOS on my iPhone or Ubuntu or Windows or the Mac OS X, right? We call an operating system that layer that works between the software applications and the hardware at the bottom, right? So it's a layered kind of thing. And these are the resources. Now your hypervisor, a type 1 hypervisor takes the place of the operating system. So one of the things that we've already covered earlier is that in a type 1 hypervisor, we do away with the operating system. And the hypervisor lays hold of the physical hardware and it has something like the device manager, and there's no operating system. So the VMs sit right on top of the hardware once the hypervisor creates this set of resources, right? So that's a type 1 hypervisor. And versions of type 1 hypervisors like that are called VMware, right? So VMware, well, VMware has a product called ESX, and that's a type 1 hypervisor, but then they also have VMware Workstation or VMware Fusion. And those workstation versions of VMware are much like VirtualBox. Those are type 2 hypervisors. In this case, the type 2 hypervisor operates just like any other application, which is why I can do other applications. The only thing about a hypervisor in this context is that the performance is very much challenged. Now, what am I saying? It would seem like having a separate assignment to maintain the hypervisor, and I put this at the top of the list, so when you open up your Blackboard, you should see this. This is the next assignment and the final solution, right? So you probably ask yourself, what's the point of having a separate assignment about maintaining the hypervisor? Why is that a thing? Well, it's a thing more so for type 2 hypervisors. Type 2 hypervisors have to compete with other applications. So this is running alongside Office applications, alongside other utilities, and in this case, since I'm multitasking here for a class, right? It's running alongside Zoom. It's running alongside the video screen recording that's running in the background. It's running alongside all these tabs in the browser because I have my browser open. It's just another application. So it may seem a trivial thing. But for a type 2 hypervisor, maintaining that hypervisor, whether it's Parallels for the Mac, so, or I'm trying to think. There's a new one out called Proxmox. Has anyone ever heard of this? This,
I believe so.
yeah, this is pretty cool. So you have Citrix, you have Zen Server. These are open source like VirtualBox, and then Proxmox, right? So Proxmox, I think, is derived from Citrix. Now, I haven't had a chance to research this, but I believe the internals of Proxmox is that it's Linux based, right? So it is a type 1 hypervisor. It's like VMware ESX, okay? So VMware ESXi, it's bare metal. You'll see the word bare metal when we're talking about type 1. So Proxmox is an open source. You don't have to pay for it, right? And it's created, I think, with Linux internals. And it says here that Perl and Rust are coding languages in this environment. But this is a bare hypervisor. And essentially, to update and maintain these, all you're doing is updating and maintaining the actual software itself. That's like running operating system updates, right? And you're done. But when you're involved with a type 2 hypervisor, we've said this before, there's kind of a pecking order, and there's something else you have to do before you even open up the virtual box. Can anybody tell me what you're supposed to do that's a best practice before you begin to update a type 2 hypervisor?
Run host updates.
Yes. Excellent. Yes, 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 absolutely. You're supposed to go ahead and run updates on the host. And when we say run updates on the host, we're not just talking about the operating system updates. Now, have any of you had other OS updates this week?
Yeah.
And does anyone know what tomorrow is, the day and the date? What's the date tomorrow?
The 13th.
It's Friday, the 13th. Has anyone ever heard about something in particular with Friday the 13th? I mean, it's not a trick question. I'm just asking. What do you know about Friday the 13th? Talk to me.
The movie.
The movie, right? It's a horror show. But in hacking terms, did you know that Friday the 13th has special meaning among hackers? That Friday the 13th is supposed to be like all hell breaks loose, you know, it's an occasion for Anonymous, right? The collective of clandestine hackers to just sort of band together and wreak havoc, right? So this is a week in particular where operating system updates have been going like crazy. I have had to update my Windows in the last 24 hours 3 times. I've had to reboot in the middle of work 3 times in the last 24 hours. And I rarely see that. But if I don't get this out of the way first, and I don't constantly check for updates, I'm just asking for it when it comes to the hypervisor maintenance, okay? So the host maintenance is the first step. Thank you for sharing that, Luke. Is there anything else I should do on my host besides update the operating system? Do any of you, well, let's change the question. When any of you are running a VirtualBox, are there any other applications that you also run simultaneously the same time you're running VirtualBox? They're open all the time. Is anyone, I mean, do you understand the question? Are we saying that each of you never run any other applications when your VirtualBox is open? Is that true?
I mean, usually like a browser.
Huh?
Sometimes a web browser will be open.
Yes, sometimes a web browser. I would say web browsers are actually the most common thing that people have open while their VirtualBox is running. And how is it you update browsers? Does anyone know how to manually update this bad boy? I'll give you a hint. You usually go to the help menu, and then you go to the About Google Chrome. And then it checks, oh, look, it's updating Chrome. What a surprise. And that's open all the time. Now, who makes Edge? Who is it that owns Edge?
Microsoft.
Microsoft. I have a quick question for you. Do you think Microsoft updates Edge automatically when you load your Windows update? Yes or no? What do you think?
Probably not.
It's supposed to, especially if you have certain settings checked, like this in the advanced settings, where you say receive updates for other Microsoft products. That means I'm supposed to get updates for Edge or for other Microsoft products. Let's take Word, for example. That's a Microsoft product. If I go to the account and then I look at update now, and it's checking for an update. Oh no. It's supposed to do this automatically. Let's try Edge. Let's try help and feedback about Microsoft Edge. Oh, it's updating Edge. Now I just ran updates. I've rebooted 3 times in the last 24 hours. But I usually have Word open when I'm teaching. I usually have my VirtualBox open when I'm teaching about VirtualBox, right? So other applications that are going to be in play, if I'm sharing a Word document, like a study guide, I'm going to use Word, I'm going to use Outlook, I'm going to use my browsers. Those are the things. If you use Adobe Acrobat all the time, you should probably open up Adobe and see if anybody here use Java? Anyone? Anyone here use Java?
On
Used to.
occasion.
Okay. Well, if you do, you should probably go to the Java applet in the, where do you find the Java applet if you use Java? And by the way, did you know that Java, and there's a certain Python component that's required in order for VirtualBox to work right? So I'm going to restart my browser. Now, I think what's going to happen is that this might kick me off because I started Zoom in my browser, but if I drop, just rejoin, okay? Everyone?
Okay.
So I'm going to restart my browser. Are we still there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that was pretty seamless. Okay. Okay. So when you go into, I'm going to save my work before continuing. Yeah, I'll save it. It's going to update Word. It's also updating Outlook, Access, Excel, PowerPoint. It's updating everything in Office. So if I update one application in Office, it updates them all. And if I have my Outlook open all the time, which I usually do, then that's something I want to update if it's running alongside my VirtualBox. Now, if it's something that isn't running alongside my VirtualBox, I don't know that I care about it so much. But are there other things that might be running in your system tray that are loaded all the time? Do we have any gamers in our audience? Discord people? Well, come on, don't be shy. Any Discord fans out there? Any VPN users? Do we have any VPN users that love using VPNs? Because we have family in the States and we get our cool streaming media through a VPN. We have anybody that does that? Maybe?
Sometimes I do play some games
Yeah.
through Steam.
If you have anything that's open in the system tray that's turned on all the time, my point is you want to make sure that it's updated, right? And if you don't, well, it's kind of like spitballing. So even though we're asking you to update the hypervisor explicitly in our assignment, we want you to know that there's more to it, especially for a type 2 hypervisor. And the actual requirements of this assignment are simpler. So there's a video link of a session from last year, right? And then there's something about the need to download C++ redistributables. Has anyone ever seen this before?
Yeah.
Okay, so let me share another screen. I'll segue into this. So I'm going to go ahead and attempt to maintain my hypervisor. And the first thing I'm going to do is start with VirtualBox. And I'm going to go into check for updates. And it's going to say nothing to update. And I'm not going to trust it because half the time I can flip a coin. So I'm going to go out to, I have to relaunch Chrome or it's not up to date. So now I've relaunched Chrome and it's up to date. I'll go to VirtualBox.org. And why would I go there manually? Well, because if there's a bug, sometimes this stuff doesn't work. And if you click into here and you see something other than the current version, then you know that the link inside the software itself that's supposed to do this properly doesn't work. You can have other network difficulties on your host that prevent this from running properly. So what am I saying? Your host network challenges can create a misfire with this. So you always want to manually check the website. And then after you've checked the website, you go to About VirtualBox, and if the number matches 7.0.10 release, what is that? 158.379. Kind of a small number there. 158.379. I go back to here. If I look in here at the release date, it's the same release date. 7.0.10 is the same release date. Okay. Now, oftentimes people will update this without updating the extension pack. So that's another thing that happens is that they go ahead and they update. Let's say they download the latest version, or they use the prompts to download it, and the extensions don't follow. So it's always good to check to see if extensions are loaded. So whenever you download a new version, the one thing you want to do is download the extension pack and then load those at the same time you run Windows. Now, have we talked about the purpose of a hash and why that's so important?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so when you download this hypervisor and you install it, sometimes hackers get a hold of these websites and they set up downloads with malware inside, payloads. They modify the install package. That's how people get infected. One of the ways that people get infected. When you download this, and I'm going to go ahead and download this now, so it's downloading. If I look at the MD5 hash, sometimes called a checksum, and I look at what I downloaded, here it says 158379. Everybody see that? That's the match for what I have. If I want to make sure that my install file is proper and it's untainted, it's uninfected. I mean, it's pure, it's not infected. Then what I do is I generate a hash and I look at the values. So I'm going to go to this site and I'm going to find the version of VirtualBox that I'm using, and it's not the extension pack, but there's a hash for that too. It's the VirtualBox Windows. It's this one right here. Does everyone see that?
Yes.
That's the MD5 hash. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to use a right click and copy that and open up my notepad. And when you get a new version and you're installing and maintaining your hypervisor, if you go ahead and then you have this hash, and now you get a hashing tool called Hash Tool, right? You can go to the Microsoft Store and download Hash Tool. It's a free tool. I want to select MD5, and I'm going to point to the download I just did. And in a minute, it's going to give me this hash or checksum. If I copy that, and then I go to my notepad and paste it right over this one. So I'm going to paste it right here. All the values should match. That means that I have a pure, uninfected, malware-free install. That's what it means. So that's something that's worth doing, and that's why they provide the hashes for you. SHA-256 is one flavor of a new hashing algorithm called SHA-2 or SHA-2, and it's just a longer hash. It's more accurate, it's more reliable. MD5 is pretty reliable unless you're doing like forensic stuff for a courtroom. Okay. Any questions about hashing and the checksums? Now, we said that the extension pack here actually is applied to virtual machines through what method? In our last class, I showed you something you have to do with the virtual machine right after it's built. Does anyone remember?
That was the guest editions.
Guest editions is correct. That's right. So if I take, let's say I have a server called Papa Smurf, right? And I go ahead and load Papa Smurf, and I think that's a server, that's a 2022 server, standard edition. And I load this, and it's Windows. And in just a minute, this will be up. It's kind of stuck. We did talk about how to gracefully shut down something if it hangs, right?
Yeah.
We can use the ACPI shutdown or send it the shutdown signal. Shutdown signal is called ACPI. So you do that, it's like hitting the power button quickly or telling it you want to shut down this way. Where you go, yeah, I want to shut down. That's the shutdown signal method. The other method of powering it off is like ripping the cord out of the wall or pulling the battery out of the laptop. So everybody sees how slow this is, right?
Yep.
And one of the reasons it might be slow is because I don't have the guest additions loaded. And every time that I update my hypervisor, every time I update this environment, I have to go inside each of the virtual machines. This is the takeaway here. I have to open up each and every one of my virtual machines and reload the guest additions. So I have 4 virtual machines here. When I upgraded to 7.0.10, the extension pack was updated, but I didn't go into each of these and load the guest additions again. And because I didn't do that, I didn't get the best advantage of the update. I didn't maintain my virtual environment, my hypervisor or my virtual machines properly. So that's the other piece of this for the assignment, is that you have to do the guest additions. Did we show you how to do that in our last class? Did I demonstrate that? Or is anyone willing to do that with us? Tell me what to do. Wow. So there's more reboots today. Let me see if I can start another machine up. Let me try this one real quick. I should be able to start this one without too much trouble. And it should come up a lot faster. How do we kick off a guest additions load? Does anyone know? I thought we demonstrated this before. Okay, so here's a practical question. Can everybody still see my screen?
Yes.
Look at what's happening. I can't move my mouse outside of my virtual machine. Has that happened to you before where you're like stuck inside the virtual machine? What do you do to get out of that? I think we've covered it once before.
Isn't it right control? If
Yes.
I'm remembering correctly.
I think it's right control on most machines. It says the right control key, you click the mouse, right? So I should be able to hit the right control key, and now I have my mouse down here, yes. So that's the helpful part, is that in this hypervisor, there's a trick to getting out of there. In Hyper-V, it's different. Hyper-V on the Windows client operating systems like Windows 10 and Windows 11, that's a type 2 hypervisor. But Hyper-V in a dedicated role on a server is more like a type 1 hypervisor. There are other competitors that would argue and say, no, it's not a type 1 hypervisor, but it is very efficient. Let me see if my other machine is going here. Okay. So what do I do to prompt? What do I do to prompt my guest additions?
You load it in from devices.
So where do I go to devices? Walk me through on my screen. Are you talking about the devices on the server? So I go here to the device manager. Is that what you're talking about?
No, in the upper left menus at top.
That's correct. There's a menu up here and it says insert guest addition CD image. And what does this say? Does everybody see that?
Yep.
Yes.
So you can upgrade. You can install a new image for guest editions and then insert the guest editions disk. And that gets pretty interesting. So it's installing a new guest editions image. And that's kind of a new wrinkle. Now, if you've run the extension pack properly, it should be loading the latest version. But it's a good idea to go ahead and select this first, and then select this one, insert, right? So when you insert, so this is kind of like the Automagic approach. When you use this option to upgrade the guest editions, it's working behind the scenes to do that. But if that gets stuck like it is, then you can insert the guest image. And then once you insert it, it should pop open in File Explorer. Now, what I suspect we're seeing is that it's implementing the new version of guest editions, which includes the device drivers for your display adapter. And there we have a display adapter wrinkle. Did everybody see that? The little display went kind of wonky there for a second.
No, that was fast.
Yep. So what do you do if it says, hey, I have to automatically repair Windows? Do you interrupt that and shut it down, or let it automatically repair? What's the answer?
Let it repair.
Let it repair. It's not a trick question, okay? You could turn off your PC. If you did something to trigger this, right? If you did something to trigger it, like, yeah, I was messing around with the drivers and now it's weird, I can continue. So I'll go ahead and continue to Windows Server because I was noodling with these driver options, right? I could troubleshoot. I'm going to have some confidence that I knew what I was doing and it was loading an extra driver, and that's why it sputtered and crashed. Because it was me that was doing it, and that happens sometimes. Now, if that happens spontaneously and you're working with your virtual machine, and all of a sudden you see that window, you should let it fix your virtual machine, just like you would a real server, a physical server. So it's still trying to install this image, and now it's going through the repair mode. Let me see if my other virtual machine is, all right, so here's my other virtual machine, Papa Smurf. I'm just going to go ahead and see if I can insert the disk and show you the manual process. I thought I had done that before. The end of the last session. And while that's loading, let's take a quick look at your solution. So your solution is going to take you through different configuration options for your virtual machine, and how to maintain your machine after you configure your machine. So what are we saying? When I install and configure my machine, and I'm just going to put power here. So the server manager comes up. I can install a role, a server role for my server virtual machine. I can make it a web server. I can make it a database server. I can make it a domain controller. I can make it a DHCP or DNS server. There's all sorts of roles that I can add. I can make this a certificate server. Has anyone ever heard of a certificate server before?
No.
Have you ever seen the padlock in the upper left corner of a web browser? It says the connection is secure and the certificate is valid. Have you ever wondered where they get the certificates that make the padlock work right? From a certificate server, right? I can make my server a system that manages certificates to secure websites, which is really cool. But the point is that I have a role And as soon as I configure a role like that, the moment I do, I have to run updates again. Because if I don't run updates, and I'm gonna pass my mouse over this so that that's something weird about everybody seeing this? How this stuff isn't quite skippy until I pass my mouse over it? Are you seeing the same thing on your end? Anyone else see something similar to that happen on their system?
No.
Okay. Well, if we add a role and we create something like, let's say that I'm going to use, so I'm going to click through these. I'm going to go ahead and configure my machine properly. And I want to click next. When the next screen comes up, let's say I want to turn it into a web server. Okay. Yeah, and this is supposed to be working here. My other machine's up. Says it's installing the image. I have some kind of error, so I need to do this manually. So this is actually a good thing that it happened. I'm going to go ahead and put this here and then log in, and then I'll insert the disk and then show you what you have to do. It is at the end of our video from last week. Maybe this thing is working right now. Nope. This thing. Where is it? There. Can everybody see this?
Yes.
Have you heard of a fax machine before?
Yep.
You can make this server a fax server. You can change it so that it can deliver faxes over the internet to people with fax machines, which is really cool. Or you can use it to connect systems remotely for remote access, or you can use it as a hypervisor. You can say, I want this server to be a hypervisor so it can run other virtual machines. Did you know you can run a virtual machine in a virtual machine that's on a host? And what's recommended is that you only do that one layer. So what am I saying? I could take this server, make it a Hyper-V machine, and that means it's a hypervisor that's running inside the VirtualBox hypervisor. So I have two layers of virtual machines. But when I change whatever role I use, if I say, okay, I want to do DNS, or I want it to be a web server, right? If I want it to be a web server, whatever role I maintain, as soon as I do that, the last thing you have to know about maintaining your system is that after you configure it, you have to run updates all over again. So as soon as you finish completing a role, now the mix of applications and services that are running on this thing are different. So you have to run update again. After you've done it, you have to run update again. And let's get back to the guest editions. So if I inserted my guest editions properly, I should be able to go to my CD drive or DVD drive. And here's what I see. I want the 64-bit version because I'm running a 64-bit OS. So I'm going to take the VBox Windows editions, that's guest editions, AMD 64. Does everybody see that?
Yep.
I will double click it and I will manually run this. And then even though I had an error when I went to install or automatically do it and it had an error, I can do it manually. And this is the workaround. So that's what you need to do and know in order to finish the assignment. In order to know and finish the solution, all you have to do is follow step by step in this handy guide that shows you different ways to maintain and configure. So it's gonna walk you through some really cool stuff. And basically, it's going to show you some of the options where you can set up different environments. Now, some of this may be redundant, but you can set up a file server, right? And then the other part of this is that when you're configuring your virtual machine, this shows you how to work the display settings differently in VirtualBox and how to be able to exchange files back and forth so that you can share resources with your virtual system. So that's what the solution is about. I want you to notice that it's part 1A and part 1B. Those are the first 2 points. And then part 2A, 2B, and 2C. So all you're doing is working the different configuration features in the hypervisor environment with your server, and then you're taking advantage of those features and functionality. One more thing you need to do, you do need to finish reading your study guide. So in addition to chapters 5 through 7 in the textbook, in this course, you're doing more things independently. So what I'd like you to remember is that this is only 9 pages, right? And most of this is highlighted. And it explains things about your machine menu and file menu. Here's the stuff about the video display or the video options for your virtual machine, resizing, capturing and recording. So that's how we captured the movies that you used in your 2.1 assignment, and you played those. Did anyone have any problems playing those? Did anyone have any problem playing these?
No.
Okay. I mean, what I like is that it's a movie that plays in a browser. That's pretty cool, if you think about it. All right. That's all we have for today. Does anyone have any questions or comments before we clear? All right. Well, I remain available in case you have any difficulties finishing up the solution for module 2 and the assignment. And just give me a shout if you run into any problems. Thank you for joining us today.